Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Momentarily, you'll see our buddy Jess Settles. Yes, that Jess Settles. He's coming back again. We haven't had him on this season so far. We've had Jess, as you know, in the past 5 years on this TV show. Jess has always been kind enough to make time for me on my radio shows. So that being said, I'm going to get straight to it. Mr. Iowa basketball from back in his playing days at high school, Winfield, Mount Union, down by the Mount Pleasant, Southeast Iowa area, but also at the University of Iowa Hawkeyes, and then injuries beset Jess's career after college. But now analyst for basketball, college basketball, Big Ten Network, Fox Sports, ESPN Networks, Big 12, Big 10, covering the basketball world now. Jess, it's great to see you, and how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. I always appreciate being on with you, Dave. It's fun to be back. Shout out to all my people in Southeast Iowa, and had some good memories coming out of there, and it's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, well, thank you, and likewise. And, the interesting thing, Jess, as we talk today, we're going to talk about Hawkeye women's basketball in this first segment, then we'll talk about Hawkeye men's basketball in the second segment. You're kind enough to join us for the whole show, and as always, the anniversary of Chris Street's passing happened a little over a month ago, so I always want to check in with you every year to talk about your experience with Chris and the impact he still has to this day. And gosh, Jess, I can't believe it's been 2 years ago when BTN, Big Ten Network, did that great special on Chris, and you were featured in it. So I definitely want to revisit that and just always keep the memory of the great Chris Street alive. But let's you and I talk Hawkeye women's basketball first. And Jess, as we talk today, as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, March 4th, Hawkeye women getting ready. I can't believe I'm saying this to you, Jess. They're getting ready to play the first day. No opening round bye, no second day bye. They are in it right away. And they face Wisconsin, whom they just beat last Sunday. But Jess, let me lay something out for you, reality here. If and when they beat Wisconsin tomorrow night, Wednesday, then they play the next day on Thursday against Michigan State, 24th ranked right now. Michigan State really pressured, very similar to their men's team, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But Michigan State really laid the pressure on the Hawkeye women full court, Jess. And that's been the bugaboo, like we saw in the Tennessee game early in the season for the Hawkeye women. Jess, you pressed this team. Unfortunately, Caitlin Clark's not walking through that door as the one-person press break. So now they've had some issues. They've seemed to have worked some of that out. Some free throw shooting has jumped up and bit them, poor free throw shooting. Although Lucy Olson, as I mentioned in that UCLA game, made free throws to tie the game late. But Jess, those things, then missing some short shots and bunnies, they got to work that out. They work so hard offensively and well together to get those shots. You got to close out. Those three things. Is that Caitlin Clark in a nutshell? A closer, a one-person press break, and free throws. There you go.
Yeah, right. She's one of the few guards in the country that you can't press, and her speed and her strength, she just carves those up like it's not even there. She actually, Caitlin obviously liked to be pressed because then you're scrambling and she gets by that first wave and then hits those logo threes and all that. But like you said, she's not walking through that door. A couple things from that. Iowa, we believe Iowa's the most high-profile team in the country. Now, South Carolina and UConn, they've got their legacies and people tune in for that. But with so many eyes on Iowa basketball, you got to bring your A-team officials. They have to assign the A-teamers. And you can't have that moving screen light. You can't have that called. So you throw in the missed free throws, the bunnies, and some really questionable calls. You don't like to say that, what's Bill Belichick always says, you are what your record says you are.
Bill Parcells said that first, and I referenced that the last three shows, so you walked right into that. Okay, you are what your record says you are, yep.
But the reality is maybe you're not, right? Because some of those are –
Agreed.
Some of those are not the right calls, and you miss a few. But I think we're better than our record shows. And we had the 3 or 4 game stretch in there where we just couldn't hit a free throw late, and that just kind of rips your heart out. But that's the reality of the situation. Now you find yourself in a little bit of a tough spot going into the Big Ten tournament. But just the exciting thing is for us is those are things that can be cleaned up. It's not like they're not hitting open shots. It's just free throws. They can be cleaned up. Hopefully the officiating will be better as you get into March here. And then I'm optimistic that Hannah Stolke is going to take over the world here, but it's going to be tough with the gauntlet they have coming up.
Yeah, right in lockstep with you. I said that last week with your former teammate Kent McCausland when I said, I know Bill Parcells said you are what your record says you are, and I said, but Kent, almost exact word for word as you just said. I have a hard time believing that this Hawkeye team is better than that. And congratulations, by the way. It was announced earlier today. Again, we record this on Tuesday afternoon, March 4th. Lucy Olson, first team All Big Ten. Hannah
Nice.
Stolke, all second team All Big Ten, and Sydney Falter, honorable mention All Big Ten.
We had a special year that last year, Tom Davis's year, and you know, for anybody, for anybody who's 40 and over and remembers the Dan Gable, Hayden Fry, C. Vivian Stringer, Tom Davis era, it was so special because of who those people were, and we had full access to them, Dave. Like
Yeah.
we could go over and sit in the office with Hayden if we needed to, or see Vivian she'd be on the court, she'd talk to us for 10 minutes and give us advice. It was just a different time, and so Hayden watches that game where we upset Kansas, and he's like, loves us doing the hokey pokey. So he comes over, to teach us how to do it the right way with that Southern draw. And I just can't even believe I was able to be a part of it. I really can't.
He is an Iowa farmer, Jess Settles, and talking to us from his farmhouse today. And always love getting that mention in there. And go back to past episodes with Jess, because Fran McCaffrey tells a great recruiting story when Fran was at Notre Dame. And Jess, I know you've heard this a thousand times, but I got to say it to the viewers. Jess Settles walked up on Julia Roberts. Yes, that Julia Roberts. Jess is visiting Notre Dame, and Fred McCaffrey was an assistant there. And Julia Roberts was there at Notre Dame's homecoming for some movie shoot or something. And it's still in high school or coming into college or going into college during your recruitment. And she's sitting there with her boyfriend at the time, actor Jason Patrick. And you said, "I have Jess Settles, Iowa." Shook her head. And I always say this to you, Jess, the amount of street cred you have is unbelievable.
So that's so funny you bring that up. So this is the legendary story, right? So I've got the most legendary story of any recruit that never signed with Notre Dame, right? It's still talked about. It still echoes throughout the stadium there. And Fran McCaffrey has told this story so many times, and I've been asked about it so many times over the years. It's like on its 20th version. So at least part of this is true. But the way it's remembered, because Fran tells it as he set the whole thing up because he had heard I liked Julia Roberts, and everybody did back then, right? She was the main star in the country, and he sets it up like it was part of the recruiting visit. But it was basically, the way I remember it, the guys had pointed out that she was up there, and for some reason I was a little more confident back then when I was 18. I think it was Jason Patrick. You said that, is that right?
Yes, I did. Yes.
So he must have gotten up to go get something to eat, and so his seat is opened up about 20 rows up. So I just kind of hustle up there, and she says, I introduced myself, and she's trying to hide out, which I don't blame her. Right. And she goes, "Hey, can you sit down here?" Basically, like, let's not cause a scene here. so then I sit down, and I'm assuming it's for a minute and a half, but to me it seemed like 10 minutes. So you can imagine my buddies down courtside, they're like, "Hey, she just had Jess sit down. Like, this could end up being a date." And it gets told differently from there, but it was legendary.
I love you telling that story, because I always say this every year when I have you on, or a couple times a year, and I always say somewhere between what happened and what is said actually happened, and I love that you said that.
Exactly. So I don't even know anymore, but it most of that was true.
That is Jess Settles. I love it. Right there in a nutshell, folks. Right there. He's still got that big smile. Iowa kid through and through. Jess, my friend, let's take a quick pause. We'll come back and talk Hawkeye men. It's always great talking Hawkeye men's basketball. It's always great swapping stories with Jess. I love to just sit back and listen, because as Jess said, not just in the basketball world, but my stories pale in comparison to Julia Roberts, Jess Settles, and all the others. But my friend, take a quick break and we'll come back. These Jess Settles folks from Hawkeye basketball playing great. I'm Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. We'll be back with more in just a few moments.
Hawkeye is brought to you by Better Edge, your ultimate social betting marketplace. With no VIG, you're bound to win more on every bet on Better Edge. Founded by Hawkeye alum James Siles and proud Iowan Greg Kajewski, Better Edge delivers an unmatched betting experience. Plus, what's not to love when they're committed to supporting charities and children's hospitals near you? Join the action now. Sign up at betteredge.com/Hawkeye and get $10 to start winning more today. Better Edge, where your social betting means your bets go further and you win more.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Jess Settles, former Hawkeye great, will join us on screen momentarily. Jess, of course, as you know, former Hawkeye basketball playing great. Also, former Mr. Iowa basketball in high school from the Winfield, Mount Union, Mount Pleasant, Iowa area, but Winfield, Mount Union to be specific. And Jess now an analyst for men's basketball on Big Ten Network, Fox Sports, also ESPN networks covering Big 12, Big 10. Just a great guy through and through. Also an Iowa farmer. So always want to get that in there, Jess, still back to his native Iowa roots. So my friend Jess, good to see you again. Thanks for agreeing to do the whole show with us today. So let's talk Hawkeye men's basketball. Big game upcoming as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, March 4th. Big game upcoming this Thursday night at Carver Hawkeye Arena. It's senior night. You know what that's all about, Jess. Hawks facing Tom Izzo and Michigan State right now, the number 8th ranked team in the country. Coming off a huge week, Michigan State is, Jess. By the time this show airs, the viewers will know the result of the game already. But beat Wisconsin this last weekend, then throwing a half quarter to beat Maryland at Maryland. So they're on a high right now. And the Hawks coming in kind of limping a little bit, Jess. Hawks got to win one of the next 2 games against Michigan State at home or closing out Sunday against Nebraska at Nebraska to finish above 500 and hopefully make the Big Ten tournament. Right now, they are in that 16th spot, so they'll be on the outside looking in. They got to do some magic, but the destiny is in their own hands, Jess. Let's talk a little bit about this upcoming Michigan State game, please, Jess.
Wow, probably the one team you don't want to face when you're going through adversity on your own, right? You just laid it out. Again, so much on the line there. First of all, I hate the rule that not every team can play in the Big Ten tournament. I've been saying that for a month, and it sounds like some of the coaches are starting to echo that as well. But Michigan State, as we all
Jess,
know,
I want to jump in real quick. I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that because Fran mentioned on his radio show last night or his YouTube show with Dolph and Bobby Hansen. He's been saying it for the last couple months, as you said, or all season. He can't stand this rule. And I just wanted to jump in real quick. So obviously you, Fran, and a lot of us feel that way. So go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these kids deserve to play in this. The fan bases deserve to go to the city for a couple nights, and you never know what can happen. And especially, Iowa's history is they've made a run to the championship game even in adverse situations. But Michigan State, as we all know, I mean, all your viewers know and can break them down like everybody else can, because they're going to rebound and they're going to ram the ball down your throat, and they're going to keep coming in waves, and your transition defense has to stop them, and nobody usually can over the course of 40 minutes. So defensive transition is going to be huge, which means shot selection is going to be huge. Iowa's going to force some threes up. That's what they do. And if we're on, then we can hang around. If we're off, then it's going to lead to dunks and fast breaks at the other end. Now, there have been a lot of years under Fran McCaffrey where Michigan State has had great teams and he's been able to take them down. So they've had trouble guarding us. They've had trouble guarding Iowa, cutting to the basket and getting shots. But it's just all about transition defense. And man, do they have some athletes right now?
Well, Fran had mentioned that again, or Dolph actually mentioned it to Fran last night. He's had some recent success, to your point, against Michigan State. And, I kind of look at this like you said, boy, this is the wrong team at the wrong time, but who knows? And I thought he referenced something else, and he's made it very public, Fran has, that the officiating around Josh Dix and Peyton Sanford being held or grabbed a lot. And again, Jess, the wars in the Big Ten. It's physical, especially against an Izzo team. You might as well grab a helmet and shoulder pads. We were talking about Hayden Fry in the segment before. You might as well get ready for that. And if you think that's going to change to Thursday night at Carver Hawkeye, folks, you got another thing coming, because Izzo, they are physical, as you mentioned, Jess. They rebound like nobody's business at or near the top of the country in rebounding. They got Jace Richardson, who's a freshman, of course, his dad, Jason Richardson, everything in the NBA back in the day. We know what that kid can do. He's going to be all freshman, may end up not even coming back to Michigan State next year, although I got a feeling he probably will. But they got an all-everything guard. They got their big horses inside. Very, very going to be a very tough and physical game, to your point, Jess.
It's interesting. It seems like it's been almost 7 years ago where they put the freedom of movement into the game, because a lot of these point guards were just getting grabbed and tripped, and you couldn't even think they could hardly get to the paint. And then I was in a meeting once talking to some guys with some insight, and then somebody was like, well, Tom Izzo's guys are always forearm shivering the cutter, so you come across the lane and you catch one of these. And so it's, then they've almost gone too far with the rules and the trips to the monitor and all that. But my point is that the physicality of Michigan State is one of the reasons why. And so they've always been that type of team where they just go right up to the edge and they force you to blow the whistle. And it's hard to do that over 40 minutes. And then Tom Izzo, obviously, with his legendary status, is wearing those officials out. And, you tip your hat to Michigan State. That's what they do. But if you're not ready in that first 3 minutes, like you're emphasizing, if you're not ready to play a physical, tough game, meaning you had better block out like your life depends upon it. You got to be able to hold your ground, maybe a little pushing and shoving, maybe even go nose to nose with somebody. If you show weakness, you're going to get blown out of that gym, and that's just how it is.
To your point, the Hawks are going to want to put on their bravest and best face these next two games, obviously against Michigan State and Nebraska.
I'll guarantee you that 99% of our viewers here right now are it's going through their head. They're saying, but they just don't guard enough to get it done. And the defense just has not been there, and that's been the story the entire season. And there are nights where this Iowa team can score 80 points and lose, and they just have not been able to put stops together, games together defensively. And they've been in a lot of these games, and even in these games they're not favored. But against Michigan State, against Nebraska, you got to defend because they run so many dynamic sets. They're moving well without the basketball. They're screening and rescreening the screener, and Hoiberg's got a deep pocketbook. So does Fran. I mean, these are tough offenses to guard, but it comes down to defense. So, at this time of year, Dave, can you make them better defensively? No. So you kind of, as a player, you got to guard your yard. You got to be really physical and tough and play with a chip on your shoulder and take personal pride in stopping the guy in front of you. And we'll just, we'll see if they're up to the challenge. But defensively, they have not been able to get it done. And that's why the record is what it is.
You nailed it perfectly, and it's adversely affected their rebounding. I want to talk to you about Chris Street. It's always great to talk about the legendary and great Chris Street. So Jess Settles, former Hawkeye basketball playing great. I look forward to talking to you after this next commercial break. Kind enough to join us for the whole show. So you ready to roll, Jess? Thanks again, my friend.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you, Jess. For Jess Settles, I'm Dave O'Hara on Hawkeye. We'll be back to close out the show in just a few moments.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman from Mershman Seeds. Substitutions cost you money. Why take their seconds when you can have our first choice? Here's Ben Paper to tell you more about Mershman Power Core Enlist corn.
We are way ahead of Big Seed on this one. This corn has 4 different post-herbicide tolerances, multiple modes of action for above-ground pests, and it is some of the highest-yielding corn genetics that are out on the market today.
If you're one of the many that got substituted on your corn hybrid last spring, contact your local Mershman Seeds dealer today and ask them about Power Core Enlist corn. From Mershman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Momentarily, you'll see our good buddy Jess Settles joining us just for the whole show. Thanks to him, as always, former Hawkeye basketball playing great, Iowa native, also a current analyst, broadcaster for Fox Networks and Big Ten Network, ESPN Networks, calling Big Ten and Big 12 games. Jess, of course, Iowa farmer as well. I got to get that in there as always. An Iowa native and still here in Iowa to this day. But Jess, we talked about some of your former teammates back in the day, and one of them, Chris Street. You didn't get to be his teammate. We talked about you leading younger guys on their Iowa campus visits. Chris Street was your quote unquote big brother and did that for you. And you went into the whole story for years now, telling us about, right before his 21st birthday on January 19th, 1993, Jess, you know the story well. Chris Street tragically passes away, and you found out after setting a gym record, you were playing a high school game. And it's just every time I think of this, Jess, the 32nd year now, a little over a month ago of his passing. Talk to us a little bit about where that takes you in your mindset.
So that night, Mike Kelker was our coach at Winfield Mount Union, and he had coached at West Point, before that. And we were the team of the state for probably 2.5, 3 years in there, just a celebrity team. And, packing them in everywhere we went, and everybody down, Cardinal of Eldon, and, whether at Keokuk, Fort Matt, wherever we were, it was the show. So we happened to be in Pekin that night. And this is before the cell phone era. And I believe the accident happened right around the first period. And I tell people, I think that had that news gotten to the gym, I'm not sure we would have continued playing that game, because Mike Kelker was good friends with Chris Street and their family. Clay Edwards was being recruited. I obviously had signed with Iowa, was really close with Chris. So I don't know. I doubt we would have continued playing that game. But in that time, you didn't get the information that quickly. So we got on the bus, and Mike Kelker, as all head coaches do, they sit in the front seat, and the rest of us kind of sit towards the back. And I just remember him saying, hey, yelling back, be quiet, and told the bus driver to turn the radio up. And you're on 1040 WHO, and the tragic news comes across, and you got to listen to it twice to even believe it. And so then it becomes a whirlwind. Your life changes. Obviously, the Street family is forever devastated. And I remember going to the funeral 4 or 5 days later, whatever it was, and my mom and dad and I went up. We got there early, and Wade Looking Bill and John Street. There were so many people there, Dave. It was the event of the decade, and we were and all your listeners will know everybody felt close to Chris Street. He just had that chemistry with people, even though they'd never met him. So it was just a consuming mourning of the entire state. And then Wade Looking Bill and John Street knew we would hardly even be able to get close to the church. And I was just a senior in high school, and they said, "Hey, you're a Hawkeye now. Get on the bus and go with us." So that was a huge impact on my life. Just the camaraderie of that, and becoming a Hawkeye at that moment, just being a part of the team, even though I was not. And it's crazy that you bring it up, because last night my wife broadcast the Notre Dame game, high school sub-state game at City High last night or the night before, I can't remember. And I didn't realize it was City High. And she came home, and I started telling Chris Street stories, because that's where the primetime league was when I was in high school. And I started, for some reason, it's amazing, right, that we're talking about this now. I started telling her the battles I had with Chris Street, and in the City High gym, and that's what it triggers. So things like that come up all the time for me. I see Mike and Patty probably twice a year at events or at the gym, and it's just still amazing, and it's hard to believe, and I was just right there in the middle of it. You were as well. And the University of Iowa, the basketball program's really never been the same without him. I don't know why that is. It's that people call it the Hawkeye curse, something going back to Ronnie Lester and Gannon's busted hand, I think, and Jerry Wright's broken bone, and the UNLV 20-point collapse in '87. And it's just like, I don't know. There's just something there where we've had tragedies of program, but none greater than that.
Yeah, and I thank you so much for taking us through that. And I can tell it's very emotional. For you, it really strikes all of us that way, especially you, because of your personal connection. I mean, we all, like you said, felt connected, but you especially. And I find it fascinating, as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, March 4th, that you were talking to your wife about it last night. And James Moses, the guy just before you, but was a teammate of Chris's, said the same thing you said when he was on here a month ago. We were talking about Chris's passing, and he just said, it was surreal. He said, it felt like I was floating. And he said, I was 1 year removed. James had finished a year. He was done the year before, but he just said the same thing. James said, when James was a senior, Chris was a sophomore, and he was basically that team leader. And he said right away when Chris got on campus, he had that vibe about him. And to your point, he said, Dave, I talked about Chris Street all the time as though he's here. And it's so interesting to hear you say that, and you talking to your wife about that. And that's the thing I love about Chris Street, the stories, Jess. It's like he never left us, although tragically he did. Let's always keep that memory alive. I'll make that deal with you. I love having you on every year to talk about that during this time.
Yeah, it's just fantastic that people still talk about him. So many of us who came after him, I was in a unique situation because I was expecting to be mentored by him, and I played against him in the primetime league. And I went on my recruiting visit. I was struggling. Should I come here? Can I play here? All those things you go through. And I went up one day and rode around and went to class with Chris Street, and just had him pour into me. And he's just his impact on that campus. And then it was so weird because I took all his minutes, the next year. I had to play in his spot. I was the power forward. And so I was always bittersweet about it. I was the Big Ten freshman of the year, but I would never have been that had he not been into the accident, because I wouldn't have gotten the minutes. I wouldn't have been the focal point. So all of those things came together. And I always appreciate the fan response to that team that year. We were not any good, but that place was packed. And that place, we never got booed. We were cheered. I mean, I was talked to on the street by fans every day. And most of it was because they knew the loss of Chris Street, what that meant. We were all one. We were all a state, and they pushed us through that year. And it probably can only happen in Iowa. I mean, the people just set everything aside and just supported us. So it was special, and yet it's just still unbelievable that it happened.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And your firsthand experience, just always appreciate you taking us through that every year and also giving us your input and your thoughts on Iowa Hawkeye women's basketball, men's basketball, but specifically on Chris Street. And Jess, let's do this. It's my fault earlier this year. I always have you on a couple times before this, but let's get through the season. Let's do a postseason wrap. It's always great to have you on. Thank you for taking the time. Folks, there he is, former Hawkeye basketball playing great Jess Settles. Jess, my friend, until the next time, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thanks, Dave. Good to see you, buddy. Good job.
You're welcome, and thank you. Truly my pleasure. For Jess Settles and my production partner, Greg Kieski at Better Edge and BetterEdge.com, I'm Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. That's all from us. Thanks to all of you.